Hi everyone. Okay, welcome to my next episode of 5-Minute Fridays. Today we're going to be talking about coconut oil. I get asked this question a lot, and so I want to break it down for you guys and make it really simple to understand. First, there have been a lot of headlines suggesting that coconut oil is bad for you, and I want to just clear something up. There was a report that came out from the American Heart Association suggesting that coconut oil is bad for you. And here's the thing. We can't make blanket statements like that because it doesn't always apply to every single person. And if you do a little bit of research, you will see that their report is actually quite flawed. And the issue is that coconut oil does fall into the category of saturated fat. And as we know, we've been conditioned to believe that all fat is bad, and especially saturated fat, and it clogs our arteries and it raises our cholesterol and it does some really, really bad things in our body. But that's just too much of a blanket statement. And so I want to break it down for you. So here are the things that you need to know. Number one, our cholesterol numbers can be very, very confusing. When we go to the doctor's office, we get a cholesterol test in our annual exam, and it measures three things typically: our high cholesterol, our low cholesterol, and our triglycerides. But the problem is that it's not so black and white. And a lot of doctors do not offer a test that's going to dig a little deeper into your cholesterol numbers. So when you consume a saturated fat like coconut oil, your numbers will change, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing. Your good cholesterol could come up, which means your overall cholesterol is going to come up. But again, that's not such a bad thing. We also need to understand that there are two different types of bad cholesterol. And if you do a test with your doctor that's a little more comprehensive, it's going to measure the different levels of bad cholesterol you have. And that's going to be your best indicator of whether or not you are more susceptible for heart disease. So I encourage everyone to explore these more comprehensive cholesterol tests so that you can understand whether or not you should be worried about your saturated fat consumption. Number two, saturated fat depends entirely on how it's being consumed. Okay, so again, too many blanket statements out there. All right, so if you're eating coconut oil, saturated fat, with lots of refined carbohydrates, flours, sugars, etc., that is when it's going to be more inflammatory in your body. However, if you consume it with lots of vegetables and fiber and a very healthy diet, coconut oil can be extremely healthy and an amazing part of your overall wellness. So I encourage you to understand that it's how it's being consumed and how it interacts differently in your body based on what you're eating it with. Number three, now people get a little confused when they get to the grocery store because there's a lot of different options out there. So let me explain a couple of things to you. First of all, coconut oil, typically, this is what people think of. It's solid at room temperature, it's in the oil aisle, and it looks something like this. The other type of oil that comes from coconut oil is MCT oil, which is medium chain triglyceride. MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, are the fats that are in coconut oil. They come from coconut oil. But what's really cool is that these absorb into the body much faster. So they're a much better source of energy than classic coconut oil. And they don't need any other enzymes to be digested. So it's a really, really fast source of energy. So that is the difference between coconut oil and MCT oil. Also, something to point out, MCT oil is often not in the oil aisle. It's often in the vitamin aisle, which is very confusing. You can't imagine how many texts I've gotten from people in the aisles of Whole Foods saying, I can't find MCT oil. You can also find it on Amazon. Just make sure it's a high quality organic product. Number four, what is the difference between coconut oil and MCT oil? Well, as I just explained, MCT stands for medium chain triglycerides, and those are the fatty acids that are in coconut oil. But when you get coconut oil in the jar in its solid form, this is only 55 or approximately 55% MCTs, whereas this is 100% MCTs. Okay, does that make sense? So you've got this, which has coconut solids and other things in here, making up the remaining 45% and 55% MCTs. This is 100% MCTs. Okay, so that's the primary difference between these two products. Okay, and finally, number five, what to use when. So as we talked about, coconut oil is solid at room temperature. MCT oil, which as you can see, I've almost finished using it, is liquid at room temperature. Coconut oil has more of a flavor and a smell of coconut. MCT oil is flavorless and colorless, okay? So typically what I tell people is MCT oil you want to put in your smoothies or even your coffee or salad dressing, but you cook with coconut oil because this has a much higher smoke point, okay? You do not cook with MCT oil. So this is great for smoothies, and I also love it for smoothies because this, when you put it into the blender, gets stuck on the sides and is much more difficult to clean out, and the MCT oil does not. And the last thing I'm gonna say, and because I can hear you guys saying, well, what about all the other oils? What am I supposed to use for all the other types of cooking? And what I wanna say is, because I wanna keep this short, next week I'm gonna be talking about all the different oils that I like to use, the different healthy fats, what to use when, what oils I use for, let's say, a stir fry versus baking versus, well, we've talked about the smoothies, but we're gonna go into that in a little more detail next week. So I hope to see you next week, and I hope you have a very healthy day.